You spend your whole life believing that once you've raised your children, once you've given them your strength, your years, your sleepless nights, then finally, you will rest. That was my dream. I worked through aching backs and swollen fingers, saved every coin with trembling hands, not for luxuries, but for the simple dignity of old age. A roof over my head, medicine on the table, and enough left to never be a burden to anyone. I thought the hardest days were behind me, but I was wrong. The real storm came not from hunger, not from poverty, not from strangers, but from my own doorstep. What if the person closest to your heart, the very child you carried in your arms, became the doorway through which someone tried to steal your entire future? Imagine watching your son smile, once innocent, now clouded by a woman's shadow. Imagine realizing that love in his eyes was being used, twisted, turned into a weapon not against the world, but against you. That was the knife in my chest. Not the fear of losing money, no. Money can come and go. It was the fear of losing my son to someone's greed, of watching my pension, my blood and sweat become bait in a game I never agreed to play. And as much as it broke my heart, a voice inside me whispered, "Protect yourself, protect him, before it's too late." My name is Margaret. I'm 70 years old, a widow, and the proud mother of my only son, Daniel. For decades, it was just the two of us, me working long hours, clipping coupons, saving every spare dollar, while he studied hard and built his dreams. I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. I believed my reward in old age would be peace, security, and the comfort of seeing Daniel happy. But life doesn't always give you peace. Sometimes it tests you in ways you never imagined. For me, that test arrived the day Daniel brought home a young woman named Emily. Emily walked into our lives with bright smiles and a sweetness that seemed almost too perfect. Daniel's face lit up when she was around. He introduced her as the woman he wanted a future with, and as his mother, my heart wanted nothing more than to see him loved. So I welcomed her into my home, offered her coffee at my kitchen table, and listened to her talk about her plans and ambitions. At first, I told myself I should be grateful. Grateful that my son had found someone. But slowly, little things began to trouble me. Emily never asked about Daniel's childhood or the struggles he had overcome. Instead, her curiosity seemed to circle around money. She asked about my pension as if it were casual conversation. "How much do you get every month, Mrs. Carter?" Another time, she remarked, "Government pensions are so stable, so much safer than investments." Daniel, blinded by love, saw none of it. But I saw, I heard, and in the quiet of my heart, a warning grew louder each day. Emily hadn't come for my son's soul. She had come for my security. I've lived long enough to know that instincts don't lie. Still, I needed more than a feeling. I needed proof. If I went to Daniel with nothing but suspicion, he'd call it paranoia. He loved Emily too much, and love has a way of making even the sharpest eyes blind. So I became my own quiet detective. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even my closest friends. Late at night, when the house was still and Daniel was asleep, I sat at my old laptop and typed Emily's name into search bars. Social media is a strange thing. People reveal more than they realize. Piece by piece, I started to build a picture. Photos of luxury vacations, captions about deserving the finer things, and comments from men I didn't recognize. Then came the real blow. Buried in old posts and public records, I discovered a pattern. Emily had been in several relationships before, each time with men older than her, men who were financially stable. The relationships never lasted long, but they always seemed to end after she benefited in some way. A car here, a loan there, even whispers of expensive gifts she never returned. As I scrolled, my hands trembled. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't just a bad feeling. This was a history, a habit. And now she had set her sights on my Daniel. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, my chest heavy. The truth hurt, but what hurt more was knowing I had to carry it alone, at least for now. My son was walking straight into a trap, and it was up to me, an old woman with nothing but her wits, to stop it before it was too late. The night I finally connected all the dots, I felt my heart sink in a way I cannot describe. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was truth staring me in the face. Emily wasn't who Daniel thought she was. She wasn't some sweet young woman who had fallen in love with my son's heart. No, she was a hunter, and my son was her prey. I remember staring at the computer screen, scrolling through a trail of evidence. There it was, plain as daylight. Relationships with older, financially secure men, one after another. Each man swept off his feet, each relationship burning bright for a few months, and then suddenly gone. Always gone after something changed, after money had changed hands. I saw comments from one man's sister accusing her of manipulation. I saw pictures of expensive purses and jewelry she flaunted online, posted just weeks after breaking things off with someone else. And now she was with Daniel, my boy, who still believed in love the way a child believes in fairy tales. My chest tightened as the realization hit me. It wasn't Daniel she wanted. It wasn't his laughter, his kindness, or his future. It was his connection to me, to my pension, my years of sacrifice, my lifetime of savings, my hard-earned security. That was her target. I felt sick. How do you tell your son that the woman he thinks is his soulmate only sees him as a stepping stone to his mother's bank account? How do you shatter his illusion without shattering him? I sat there in silence for hours, the weight pressing on my shoulders like iron. In that moment, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. If I let this continue, she would drain him dry and leave us both broken. And so, with a heavy heart and a determined mind, I decided if Emily thought she could outsmart me, she had underestimated one thing: a mother's instinct and a mother's will to protect. I had the truth in my hands. But truth is a heavy thing. It doesn't just sit quietly. It demands action. And the question that kept me awake at night was, what do I do with it? If I told Daniel everything, if I laid out the screenshots, the posts, the evidence, would he believe me? Or would he see me as an old, jealous woman trying to tear down his happiness? Love makes fools out of the wisest men, and Daniel was blinded by it. I feared that in trying to protect him, I might lose him. And the thought of my only son turning against me, that was a pain I wasn't sure I could survive. On the other hand, silence was no option. If I stayed quiet, Emily would tighten her grip. Slowly, she would weave herself into his life, his decisions, his finances, and eventually, mine. I pictured the day she would stand by Daniel's side, claiming rights over everything I had sacrificed for. The thought chilled me to the bone. So I weighed my choices in the quiet of my kitchen, with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the old wooden chair beneath me. My mind spun in circles. Do I confront her directly? Do I sit Daniel down and tell him gently? Do I wait and gather more proof? Every option carried risk. That's the cruel part of being a mother. You are always standing between protection and pain, trying to save your child, even if it means they might resent you for it. I pressed my hands together, whispering a prayer into the silence. God, give me wisdom. Don't let me lose my son, but don't let him lose his future. At last, a plan began to form. If Emily was after my pension, then that was where I would draw the line. I wouldn't accuse, I wouldn't shout. Instead, I would outsmart her, silently, carefully. A battle of patience, wits, and love. Because sometimes the strongest way to fight is not with anger, but with strategy. I knew I couldn't storm into this battle with accusations. If I pointed my finger at Emily, Daniel would defend her, and she'd win before I even started. No, this needed to be subtle, quiet, a trap set with words, not anger. So I invited them both over for dinner. My old dining table had seen many things, birthdays, arguments, celebrations, but that night, it became the stage for my quiet war. I cooked Daniel's favorite meal, roast chicken with mashed potatoes, and lit the candles as if it were any ordinary evening. Emily came dressed perfectly, her smile wide and polished, her laugh too rehearsed. Daniel, poor boy, was glowing beside her, oblivious to the storm I was about to stir. We ate, we talked, and then, as the plates emptied, I carefully shifted the conversation. "Daniel," I said, pouring him another glass of water, "I've been thinking a lot about my retirement funds, about the future." Emily leaned forward, eyes sharp, though her smile stayed in place. I noticed the way her fingers tightened around her fork. That was my cue. I explained that I had recently decided to place my pension into a new secure investment, one that would lock the money away for years. "It's the safest way to protect it," I said calmly, "so that no one can touch it until I'm gone. Not even me." The change in Emily's expression was almost comical. The eagerness that usually sparkled in her eyes dimmed instantly. She tried to mask it with another smile, but her shoulders stiffened and the light chatter she kept adding to the table fell flat. I went further, gently. "I believe it's important for both partners in a relationship to be financially independent. Don't you think, Emily?" Her lips curled into a smile, but her jaw tightened. She muttered something about, "Of course," and quickly looked away. Daniel, still clueless, laughed and agreed with me, but I could see Emily shrinking under the weight of the words. It was working. I hadn't accused her of anything, yet she was already unraveling. She knew the prize she came for was out of reach, and in that moment, her disappointment was louder than any confession she could have made. I sat back, silent, watching. The battle had begun, and I was winning. I have always believed that masks never last long. Sooner or later, the truth slips through the cracks no matter how well someone pretends. And that night at my dining table, Emily's mask began to crumble. After I mentioned my pension being locked away, she fell strangely quiet. The laughter that usually spilled from her lips came slower, thinner, like she was forcing it. Her eyes, once bright and eager, now seemed restless. She avoided looking directly at me, her gaze darting toward Daniel as if seeking reassurance. But what gave her away wasn't just her silence. It was the little things. The way she tapped her nails against her glass too quickly. The tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. The faint sigh when Daniel stepped out to take a call, leaving us alone. I seized the moment. "Emily," I said softly, almost kindly,
You're young. You should think about building your own future, not relying on someone else's. Her head snapped up, her smile froze, and for a brief second, I saw it. Annoyance, sharp, unfiltered. She recovered quickly, forcing another laugh. Of course, Mrs. Carter, I completely agree. Independence is important. But the words tasted bitter in her mouth. I could hear it. When Daniel returned, she plastered the sweetness back on, clinging to his arm, speaking a little too loudly, a little too cheerfully. But the shift had already happened. I had seen the truth hiding behind the charm. And Daniel? Oh, my dear boy, he didn't notice, not fully, but I caught the flicker in his eyes. The confusion when Emily brushed off my talk about independence. He didn't say anything, not yet, but I knew a seed of doubt had been planted. For the rest of the evening, Emily's words grew sharper when she thought Daniel wasn't listening. Her laugh rang hollow, her gestures too exaggerated. It was as if the disappointment she was trying to bury was leaking through every movement. I didn't need her to confess. Her body did it for her. And by the time the night ended, I knew one thing with certainty. Emily's game was slipping out of her hands.
The evening after our family dinner, I felt the air had shifted in the house. Emily no longer carried the same confident sparkle. Her steps were hurried, her voice strained, her charm cracking like porcelain under pressure. The very next week, she came over again. I served coffee at the kitchen table, just as I always did, but this time she barely touched hers. She seemed distracted, her eyes darting toward Daniel, then back down at her phone. There was a sharpness in her tone, as though the sweetness she once coated every word with had soured. Daniel noticed it too. "Are you okay, Emily?" he asked gently. She smiled, too quickly, too wide. "Of course, just tired," she said, but her fingers fidgeted nervously against the mug. And when the subject of money came up again, casually, as it always did, she couldn't even mask her frustration. She shifted uncomfortably, asking questions in half-formed sentences before dropping them altogether. It was then I saw Daniel's face change. For the first time, doubt clouded his eyes. He glanced at me, not speaking, but I knew. He was remembering the dinner, remembering her silence, her unease. The seed I had planted was beginning to grow. The final crack came a few days later. Out of nowhere, Emily announced she had urgent family matters and couldn't see Daniel for a while. Her excuses tumbled out clumsily. Her words rushed, as if she were eager to escape. And then, silence. No calls, no texts, no visits. At first, Daniel was confused, pacing around the house, waiting for her message. I stayed quiet, letting him wrestle with the silence, and slowly, painfully, he began to see the truth. Her disappearance spoke louder than anything I could have told him. I will never forget the night he came into the living room, his eyes downcast, and said, "Mom, I think you were right." His voice cracked, not from anger this time, but from the sting of betrayal. I pulled him close, my heart breaking and healing all at once. I hadn't wanted to be right, but sometimes a mother's worst fears prove true. And sometimes saving your child means letting them watch someone walk away. When Emily disappeared from Daniel's life, the silence she left behind was deafening. No angry confrontations, no final words, just absence. And in that absence, the truth settled like dust on old furniture, undeniable and heavy. For days, Daniel walked around the house with a hollow look in his eyes. He didn't speak much, didn't eat much. I knew he was mourning, not Emily herself, but the dream she represented. The dream of love, companionship, and a future he thought he had found.
To watch my son in pain was like watching my own heart crack open. I wanted to shield him from it, to erase every tear before it fell. But some lessons, I realized, must be lived, not taught. One evening, as we sat quietly on the porch, Daniel finally broke the silence. "Mom," he said softly, "I should have listened. I didn't see her the way you did. I didn't want to." His voice trembled with guilt. I placed my hand over his, the way I used to when he was a little boy. "Daniel," I whispered, "love is not blindness, it's trust. And when someone takes advantage of that trust, it's not your fault. What matters is that you see it now, and you're free of it." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I saw the faintest spark of my son returning. As for me, I was left with my own reflection. The ordeal had shaken me more than I cared to admit. The thought that my life's savings, my pension, my sacrifices could have been stolen through the smile of a stranger, it haunted me, but it also steeled me. I knew then that protecting one's future is not just about numbers on a paper. It is about vigilance, about boundaries, about courage. It is about safeguarding not only money, but the love and trust of those dearest to us. Emily's shadow had left scars, yes, but it also left behind a lesson that I will never forget. Even in old age, you must guard what you've earned, because there will always be those who try to take it, even if they come wrapped in love.
When I look back on those months, I realize they were not just about Emily or Daniel. They were about me, about the choices I had made, the sacrifices I had carried, and the future I had built with my bare hands. I came so close to losing it all, not because of a stranger, but because I almost ignored my own instincts. You see, a pension is not just money. It is a lifetime of mornings spent working when your body ached. It is the years of saying no to yourself so you could say yes to your child. It is the invisible thread tying your past sacrifices to your future dignity. And that legacy deserves protection, not only from the world, but sometimes from the very people who slip quietly into our lives. The hardest part wasn't guarding the money. It was guarding my son. Watching him nearly fall into the hands of someone who saw him as nothing more than a stepping stone, it tore at me. But it also reminded me that protecting our legacy is about more than finances. It's about protecting the hearts of those we love, ensuring they are not exploited, ensuring they understand their worth beyond what's in their wallet. Since then, I have strengthened my estate plans. I've made sure my pension, my savings, my modest assets are secured in ways that no one can touch without my blessing. But more importantly, I've taught Daniel the lesson I nearly paid too high a price for. Trust your instincts, value independence, and never let love blind you to truth. I share this story not to stir bitterness, but to shine a light. If you've worked your whole life, if you've built something from nothing, guard it. Guard it with wisdom, with planning, with courage. Don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to test intentions. Because in the end, protecting your legacy isn't selfish. It's an act of love for yourself and for the ones who will inherit not just your money, but your example. That is my final lesson, and I pray it saves someone else from the storm I had to endure.